were there actually like active anti-drug like sort of, I guess, programs?
Not ever, no.
Not in your school, no.
No.
Where did you go to school?
Well, high school was Martin Van Buren. But I actually started doing drugs when I was in Catholic school. I guess I was 13 when I started to smoke marijuana. Yeah. But there was no cartoon animals or sidekicks telling you that drugs are bad for you. There was no first lady back then. I know Nancy Reagan many years later in the 80s had that program about, don't just say no to drugs and so forth.
Yeah.
But no, that's before my era. Back in my era, most of the people I knew did drugs. Not so much hard drugs, not to excess, but most of them were doing some kind of drugs, usually marijuana and smoking hashish out of a pipe.
So it's not too different today.
Yeah.
Most people I know smoke marijuana.
But like I guess we're gonna go, and that just segueing off of that, we're just gonna go straight into the questions because, like I said,
we got a lot in store.
Yeah.
Okay.
From our very valued guest.
Thank
who has
you.
Lived during these
tumultuous times.
Yeah, it's
debauchery.
Yeah,
exactly.
Times of plenty.
Yes,
times
indeed.
of excess.
The good old days.
The good old days.
That's so called.
Yeah, but the first question I have for you.
Yes.
And feel free to also add in, Mike.
Yeah, sure, if I feel like it.
How and where did you grow up, and what was the mood of the world around you?
Well, I was born in Brooklyn originally, moved then to Middle Village, and then spent most of my life in Queens Village. I think I must have been about 7 or 8 when I moved there, so you would say that's 1969. And I lived there for, almost 50 years. Lived in a house. My parents both working at that time. Not my mother in the beginning, but then she went back to work after many years when she used to work. Was in the 50s before she got married, and then she was a stay-at-home mom to raise me and my sister, and then years later she went back to work. She used to work for a company, Decnatel, that used to package sutures for hospitals, which was taken over by Pfizer, which I'm sure a lot of people out there know Pfizer Chemical and all, pharmaceutical. Yeah. My father was a laborer. He used to work for Universal Car Loaders, which is like a trucking company that was big in the United States back in those days. He worked on 10th Avenue and 34th Street, where I think they're doing something with apartments there. They wanted to put the Jets football stadium there a number of years ago. And so my upbringing was pretty good. My parents were pretty lenient. My sister was much better than me in school. I used to get, compared to her.
Yeah.
She never did drugs. She never smoked cigarettes. She used to drink a little bit, but I'm 4 years younger than her.
Yeah.
And one of my friends turned me on actually in my basement, said, "Would you like to try them with us?" I just took a couple of hits out of it. Didn't do anything. It was no big deal.
Yeah.
But then slowly I started getting into it, and then I started copping my own drugs, which were very easy to do back then.
How are they so easy?
Alley Pond Park, really, where my high school a few
Alley
years
Pond
later.
Park?
Yeah, it was a park right behind Martin Van Buren High School, north of Union Turnpike. They had 3 parking lots. The first parking lot was where they had tennis courts and handball courts.
I've been to that.
The second one, when you went up on a loop like a hill, was you could get all kind of drugs. I mean, there were guys and women girls dealt then too, standing on a row, and they had different samples they would hand out. I know it's funny, but
on a platter,
right, of pills or of marijuana. I don't remember anybody dealing cocaine at that time up in that area.
Even though I read that it was extremely easy to get cocaine.
Right, which I did later when I got a little older. But basically, I smoked a lot of marijuana, hash, and did all kind of different pills. And but I never shot a needle, nor did I know anybody who did that. I did know people who did drop acid, tab acid, things of that nature. It wasn't something I did.
I don't get the needles, man.
That wasn't something I ever wanted. I always was afraid of needles when I was a kid going to the doctor. If I was ill back then, as soon as you got sick, the doctor gave you a needle. It wasn't today where they start giving you pills right away.
Yeah.
So no, I was never into that whole scene. But the police weren't far away. The precinct wasn't that far away. But they didn't really harass you unless you got rowdy in the park. But when they came up that park, whenever they decided, usually in the summer, sun goes down late. If they would come up earlier than the sun going down, say,
it was good or
whatever, it was time get the frig out of there, because they weren't. If they came back and you were there, they were going to pull. They were going to take you in.
So I guess the mood, you can say, back during that time was very. It was very laid back.
It was pretty laid back. Even at concerts, you could go to a concert, you didn't need drugs. You could just breathe in and get high because everybody was smoking at Madison Square Garden, Nassau Coliseum, some of the small
Wait,
halls.
that Coliseum was still up?
Yeah, oh yeah, back in
It wasn't like a recent thing.
No. You're talking 70s into the 80s. And also even Calderon Concert Hall, which I forget if it was Hempstead or West Hempstead, used to have a lot of bands there. It was about the size of a movie theater. I saw a lot of bands there at that time that were popular. Richie Blackmore, who was originally with Deep Purple, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, the Scorpions were there. I don't know if you guys know the
I know
Scorpions.
the Scorpions.
Okay, yeah.
I know Deep Purple. The other
Yeah.
one you said, I don't know.
Yeah, that was Richie Blackmore's band after Deep Purple, and then Deep Purple got back together.
So like I said, it was really a time of kind of plenty
Yeah,
where people
I mean, you
people were
went
kind
to
of,
like a
places,
hurricane.
if you were mellow,
Yeah.
like wherever we hung out, the group I was with, we cleaned up after ourselves. We didn't break beer bottles, we didn't start fights, we didn't cause trouble.
oh yeah. Contrary to like how we kind of see like
Right.
people.
Yeah.
with
I
drugs back
actually-
nowadays.
The draft ended during the Vietnam War right after it, so mid-70s. I actually had my friend's draft card to get into a bar when I was young. I was 14. We didn't really look alike facial, but our hair color, I had more hair back then. Our hair color was similar. We were the same height, same weight, so I used to use his draft card to get into bars, but I never got tossed. I was in bars at 14 years old drinking. So...
Now, if you do that today, oh my God.
No, yeah,
Right,
they-
yeah, I
There's
know.
so much.
They don't condone that well at all.
Right, and it was totally, the girls were part of the group. Cocaine for me came later, I guess early 80s. I was 20, 21.
Actually, hold off on that because I didn't.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't want to.
Oh, okay, sure. You could ask me anything. Go ahead.
I guess like before that whole stint with cocaine, because I definitely do want to ask you about that because for one thing I obviously don't know at all what cocaine
Right.
like I guess induces in your
you.
yeah exactly, but I wanted to ask like when did drugs become like I'm not gonna say important, but when did it start becoming like a thing that this is part of my life now?
Oh, really, the teenage years, because the group I was with, it was an everyday thing almost. They used to call me Six Finger because I always had a joint in my hand. So, I mean, that's
Did they
basically...
actually?
Yeah, they did. I mean, back then you could get what they called was a nickel bag or a dime bag. A nickel bag cost you $5. You could, if I could never roll, I always had my girlfriend or somebody that could roll tight with the papers. Either Big Bamboo was popular, or Easy Widers. You could get about 8 joints out of a nickel bag, cost you $5. A dime bag, if she rolled tight enough, you could get maybe 11, 12 joints even.
How big were these joints? Bill?
No, they were thin, but not pencils. I mean, you could actually, there was something in
They're
there.
like cigarettes, kind of.
Right,
big
yeah.
part,
Because
like-
not that fat. No.
because now
that's a fatty.
Yeah,
No.
because nowadays people just like people, they act really silly by having these really massive
No,
joints.
it wasn't
like the
anything.
size of those. Like,
I mean, I did
industrial
toke
pencils.
I think
joints
what's
like that, but
stopping me from
nothing.
doing it is like I just don't have the time or dexterity to be rolling it.
Right, I know that my mother.
Most of you's doing it every day.
My mother, for a while, even though cigarettes were much cheaper then, her and her best friend they had Doral cigarettes, which was a company that had a little cigarette machine where you rolled your own cigarettes. So I tried to roll them, without my mother knowing it, obviously. I tried to roll I'll tell you a story about my mother later, but I tried to roll the reefer in there, but the reefer went flying around. I didn't break the buds right, and it really got silly. So I used to have my girlfriend or people that knew how to roll for me. Otherwise, I would use a pipe for both marijuana and hash, which I loved hashish. That was readily available back then.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I mean, it sounds like. I mean, how do I explain this? Like, how did when you and your friends would just like I guess do this? It was obviously a very like social thing.
Yeah.
And like, but I guess what I'm wondering is like, what did you guys talk about?
Well, just regular things. What happened in school today, and then after we started working, I used to deliver actually the Long Island Press when I was younger, which went out of business, God, over 40 years ago. But that was a competitor news day here on Long Island. It was a broadsheet paper like the New York Times. It was big like that. And my friend Robert at that time, which I used to hang out with, we were the same age. Maybe he's a month older than me. He used to deliver the New York Daily News, and we used to do the penny savvy together on the weekend. And so we started making income as kids, as well as cutting grass for people in the neighborhood, shoveling snow, raking leaves, going shopping for the elderly in the neighborhood. but most of the money went to drugs. Beer was like 89 cents a six-pack for some cheap old beer back in those days.
Jesus.
And that's really how I got into Chinese food. I used to get the munchies, and there was a real good Chinese food restaurant right around the block from my house, and we used to walk there and get rice, and that's how I first got into eating Chinese food.
Makes me wonder if the reason why they made it so that you can't work as a kid is because they thought people would start like saving money up to buy it on shit like drugs. I don't know. Like we weren't able to work. I wasn't able to work until I was 15, and that was like I was making $60 a week.
Oh, okay.
Which in today money is garbage.
Well, I had a job for many years, which I started at 16 while I was in high school, and used to have working papers or something like that. So I had that. Now I started making. I remember it was like $44.98 a week I would bring home, and you're talking in the late 70s. So with that money, I gave my mother $10. I put $10 in a savings account. I had $25 left over, and that money lasted the whole week. I got my drugs. I got my beer. I could go out and buy an album for like $5. Or back then, 8-track tapes were popular. Which an 8-track tape, you put it into the player. It had 4 tracks, and it would just continuously keep playing. If you left it in, it kept playing.
You said, what was the neighborhood you grew up again in? What was it called? The neighborhood.
Queens Village.
Queens Village. Can you like? Is there any way like in the best of your ability, can you like take me down like a walk through Queens Village during that time? Like, what was the sights? What was the smells? What did you see? What did you hear?
It was a pretty quiet neighborhood until they put a bus depot, early 70s, a couple of blocks down from my house. Then you had buses going in, and that was a bus garage for the city buses. Most of the neighbors were friendly. Everybody knew each other. It was a mixed neighborhood even then, meaning...
What kinds of people?
Black, Hispanic, and white. A lot of people were there several generations, the white people, and then a lot of... It started getting integrated right about, I was living there maybe 2 or 3 years. It started getting integrated after the bus depot. A lot of the drivers who were black, Hispanic, wanted to live in the area where the depot was instead of living far away and then coming all the way over there. So they started to move into the apartments and buy houses. So it was a good neighborhood to grow with all different kind of people. And then later on, Asian people moved in, and people from India and Pakistan moved in. And I got to eat different foods, got to interact with different cultures. It was a great atmosphere to grow up in. And then later as an adult, I kept my parents' house for many decades after they passed away. So it was a good area to grow up in. I enjoyed it and went to school there. I did get kicked out of high school because I was clowning around in Alley Pond Park, getting high, throwing dice, and doing stupid things. And my parents, neither one of them back in, when they went to school back in the late 30s, early 40s, they never finished school. My sister did so much better at school than me, and they were very unhappy about it. But I did go back and get my diploma. I graduated in January, 6 months later than I was supposed to. When all the smart kids are getting out 6 months early. So it was just me and 2 other kids, and but I learned my lesson. And,
So that's it. Sounds like it's like I guess to also put in reference to like the art studies that we're gonna do, like what I read is that they did especially in like down. I know this isn't necessarily in the same area, but like especially in like the closest to the center of New York City, there was a lot of street art.
Yes,
Did they do street art like a lot? Like what kinds
there was
of,
some street art in Flushing too. Flushing at that time. Today it's mostly Korean. At that time it was mostly white, and they had some street art there. The 27 bus, which was beginning in Queens Village by my house, maybe you walk 3 blocks. The last stop. So it went from that was the first stop to the last stop, which was Flushing, Main Street. And you had street art there. You had a lot of stores there, and you could walk from there over the Roosevelt Avenue Bridge to the Met games at Old Shea Stadium. So that was a happening area. A big thing in the 70s, too, was head shops. They had a head shop on, I think, Main Street, just off Northern Boulevard.
What exactly is a head shop?
A head shop sold you various drug paraphernalia, pipes, bongs, psychedelic posters, which were big, black light posters, black lights, which you used to, and strobe lights. You put them up in your basement, your apartment, your house, whatever it was.
And like they would
You
glow
still
in the
see
dark.
those kind of posters in lights like Spencer's or Hot Topic or something.
Right. And, you know, when you were high, it gave you a whole different meaning as to what was going on in a poster.
Jesus.
Especially people who I knew who tripped, who were seeing Jesus Christ come downstairs and spaceships land inside the poster, which, me being high, I didn't see those kind of things. It was a different head. They were dropping acid and was seeing things like Sergeant Pepper's when they walked down the street and things of that nature. And but that was a big art. Was that psychedelic posters, psychedelic clothing?
Is that where the whole like the waves of like rainbow colored like light would come out, like words and stuff like that? Like, is that where that sort of comes from?
Yes.
And sort of psychedelic.
Yeah, and they also had posters where you could look at it, and the way it was drawn was it was like a spiral thing, and you didn't have to drop acid for this. You would be looking in there, and you could actually think it was moving. It wasn't moving, but you thought it was because the way it was drawn. It was pretty bugged out, you know.
And when you drop acid, it would just be like 10 times worse.
Well, I never did acid, so as per what they told me, my friends, that was something I didn't want to try.
Why not?
I don't know. I guess I kind of fear they had.
Well, because I'm wondering, because I know so many like people who've done it because they think it's like cool.
I don't know why I shied away from that. One thing I did do as I got older was to not just pop pills, but to open up the pill that was an upper, and you snort the inside of the pill because you get high quicker.
Yeah.
And we always drank while we did drugs too, so it was like this weird blend. Hash went good with wine. Marijuana, I would drink hard liquor. I would drink beer. We'd do shots back then. Popular was Alabama Slammers in the bar. And very sweet drinks and kamikazes. Too many of those, and you were going to lose your lunch. Too much sweet stuff. Yeah, it was bad. You know, unless you had a full stomach, you were going to yak. There was no.
Yeah, I guess the main Mike, what do you think the main contrast is between that time and like our thing? Because you got people still.
You could get away with it, and it wasn't so stigmatized as it is now. If you do all that, it's like something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
You know, they'll try to send you off to rehab or whatever.
Yeah.
As I got older, I started doing coke a little bit in my early 20s. Then I started dating a girl from high school who wasn't into drugs, but we were into music. We used to go down to the Village and see a lot of
what bands were playing?
Punk rock bands. Well, in the 80s, there was a lot of punk rock bands. Still CBGBs was around. There was bands like the Melting Five and 999, groups of that nature. Later punk era. You know, all the big names had already moved on to records like the Ramones and Blondie and Sex Pistols.
Oh, yeah.
And all of those had already hit their stride. You know, the punk era was over. These were the later era bands, mid 80s, I guess. So she wasn't into drugs. So I didn't get back into coke. I did it a little bit when I was about 20. Then I got back into it when I was in my 30s. I broke up with a girl I was supposed to marry. I started hanging out with a different crowd. I got in a door team, and coke was everywhere in the bars. This is early to mid 90s, and I really got into it. And my best friend stopped talking to me because he didn't want any part of that scene. He used to talk up with me when we were younger. He's a few years younger. He didn't want no part of it, so that hurt me because he was like a brother to me. I have a sister. I didn't have a brother. We went to concerts. We did everything together, and we double dated. We did a lot of things, and that hurt me. And then eventually I got off the coke, but it took me a while. I really was hooked on it for a while. There, about 6 months a year, I'd say. And you would think I would know better in my 30s, but no, I didn't. I kept doing it.
Well, what does coke exactly do to you?
Well, it speeds you up, gets you really horny too. It did for me. You could drink alcohol, and you sucked it down like this cup of water here. It was nothing to drink, and you would want more and more of it. And coke never really truly satisfies you. The more you did, the more you wanted. So you started coming down, you had to get more, you had to get more. And the group I hung with, we actually had a guy who would come to an apartment of a friend where we were, it might be in the basement of my house, and deliver coke to you. Like the old milkman bringing you stuff.
They call them coke monkeys.
Right. He would bring it to your house or your apartment so you could continue to high. Because when you crashed, you were out cold. You were done. You were out cold, yeah.
What I wanted to ask you, do you have any questions, Mike?
I'm trying to check some comments, but we don't have any.
No, we're not.
Because we're not on Facebook.
No, we're not. It's not even bothered. Don't worry about it. Let me see. Like, did you know any people who were like artists?
Not really. There were a few people that had talent because I did take art appreciation. There was different classes back in high school then than you have today.
Yeah, because I guess the thing I'm trying to figure out is that like since drug use was so prevalent back then, at least that's what it sounds like, based on what you're telling me, is I'm wondering how that really did affect like the scene of
Well,
art, like in music.
I had I had friends that went into bands and wrote poetry. None of them really got into painting or drawing, maybe a little bit in school related, and they carried that over for their own personal enjoyment, like to art appreciation class, things like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anybody who actually went into painting or anything like that, or sketching or anything. You know, nothing of that nature. A lot of the psychedelic art became popular. Today it's very expensive to buy any of it, I know that. A lot of the old posters that were made for concerts, the 60s and 70s, if you see them online, there's a famous guy, Rick Griffin. I think he did a lot of the Grateful Dead posters. A lot of that stuff, like the first and second printings, you can't touch that stuff. You got to be loaded to pick up that kind of stuff. And those have a lot of psychedelic features, a lot of different, very interesting aspects to them. Very complicated the way they incorporated the names of all the acts that were playing a show for like $5. You could see Jimi Hendrix, Jethro Tull, like a whole bunch of bands for like $5 somewhere.
Yeah, some of the really famous artists I know back during that time.
Did the songs? Sorry for interrupting you.
No, that's it.
Did the songs like often like talk about drugs? I know Jimi Hendrix I think did, but
a lot of them did.
eyes.
Black Sabbath did a song called Hand of Doom, which is really about heroin usage. When Ozzy's singing "Stick the Needle" and he's talking about, you know, the bad aspects of doing.
But there was like a subtlety to
heroin.
all that. Like the lyrics, I'm noticing now that like a lot of bands from back then were much more poetic about it, whereas bands and rappers now will just blatantly say what they're doing.
Oh, Black Sabbath did that. They also did Sweet Leaf, which was all about. In fact, the song starts off with the guy coughing, I guess, after smoking some harsh stuff, and he's coughing in the beginning, and it's all about cannabis, you know, about marijuana.
Sweet Leaf.
Yeah, so, and a lot of that music, Yes, and bands of that nature, Moody Blues, even bands of that nature, were really meant for you to get high to and listen to.
So why the songs are so long, especially with Yes, the songs are like 30 minutes long.
Right, it's a whole album
song is 30 minutes long.
It's really the whole
album's
album
one song.
Oh yeah, pretty much, and Pink Floyd.
Or Dream Theater,
And Pink Floyd as well.
Yeah. You could start a Yes album from here and drive the Montauk, and you might be halfway through.
Right, that's what the thing was good about 8-tracks. You would put it in the 8-track player, and you never had to touch it. It just went from track 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and kept going like in a loop. Kept going and going and going.
And obviously you'd have that going off while you guys are talking up in the.
Oh yeah, you always have music. Always have music.
Well, and what would that do for you? Like, what would it do for the high?
It would make you feel good. You dance. You'd get. It would pick up your spirits.
Something like this. I'm seeing like a.
There's something blocking my bald head.
Like I'm seeing like a menu with
Oh, now I'm seeing nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I have to remember to fix it. Just keep going.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So the music made you feel good. At all the parties, you knew you were going to be doing drugs, and then you might start making out with girls or your girlfriend or.
Your girlfriend and other girls.
Yeah, no, not at the same. No.
Well, no, I'm not saying you.
No, I'm saying,
not saying you. But
no. I'm saying that if you didn't have a girlfriend, you would try to hook up with a girl who might be available that was at the party.
So it sounds literally no different, really, than how it is now.
Yeah.
No, not too different.
So, we did drink, but that was part of the drug usage. One wasn't exclusive or separate from the other. Both were together. So it's not like we did drugs and no drinking, or we went out drinking and no drugs. It was always part of the same thing. If you went out to the bar or rock clubs back then, there was a rock club in Queens Village called Beggar's Opera, which had another name bands back then that later became popular on MTV, like Twisted Sister and bands of that nation. The Good Rats was a big popular band. Blue Oyster Cult, which is a Long Island band, used to play. I saw them in regular concert. They also used to travel smaller Long Island circuit as Soft White Underbelly. And it was them. It's just that they used that when they played clubs. Everybody knew it was them.
Yeah, it's a reference to
also Zebra was big. Zebra used to do a Zeppelin show, and then they started cutting their own records. It was a 3-piece band. They played at a lot of Long Island clubs, which were popular.
So would you say that this is like kind of like a golden age of like art, and like especially like especially
a lot of local bands, and also WLIR, which later became DRE, used to focus on a lot of the local bands. They would go around to clubs and. They would play songs on a show that they called Screamer of the Week. and people would call in or vote in. This is way before computers, etc., and pick the Screamer of the Week, and it would be a local band who would then get airplay more often on LIR. One of the bands, a girl I dated when I was in my 20s, who later dated somebody else, I forget the guy's name, I think his name was Bob, his first name. He was with a band called Wise. That was kind of a rock band. That was one of the bands that was Screaming the Week one year. I do have their albums at home.
What was the band called?
Wise, W-I-Z-E. And they had a couple of good songs, and they were also, like I said, they were on the Scream of the Week contest that they won on WLIR. So.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's
definitely more involved with everything.
But all this is, of course, happening in the backdrop of like the very. It almost seems comical to think to look back at it, like the very, how should I say, tumultuous political times of the.
Way to use a word nobody understands.
No, but there was a lot of political chaos, obviously, because of with the supposed rise of communist states and other stuff like that. Like I get like people kind of we do have somewhat of a consensus that there was a lot of corruption that was not
it'd be an escape from all that crap.
Yeah, I mean it seems like
they didn't have video games back then, which is how most of us escaped.
Yeah.
Well, no, video games became the first thing they had out. Actually, was Pong.
Yeah.
It was first in restaurants. When you went into a restaurant, maybe you had to wait for a table. You're there with your family. It was in this big hard wooden table, which you could set your drinks on, as you're waiting in a little waiting area like the lobby or foyer of the restaurant, waiting for a table of four. And it was a simple black and white TV screen, and you had like a little. Well, it looked like a hockey stick, and you were hitting this little thing back and forth like a puck.
Yeah.
And then they had a game Breakout. Then they had Space Invaders. Later on, you had
Space
and then you had Pac-Man and things of that nature. And then it went off the charts into more and more big games. And then Atari and all these things were popular. We could have it in your living room and everything.
Yeah, I guess.
And that was fun playing when you were high too. That was fun.
Yeah,
that's art. Like the video game.
Oh yeah.
Like the box art and the.
Because I guess now people nowadays seem to
cabinets.
Yeah, people seem to think that like, I guess nowadays that art is sort of I guess culture is sort of stagnating. I mean, whether or not you believe that or not, it's people say that they have, I guess, facts to back it up. But let's just say it was stagnating. Like they sort of look back during this time and think like, oh, despite like how, like understandably negative it might have been, and I guess the costs of. I guess that really large drug culture, because there was obviously some costs.
Right.
Like they feel as if like that era is kind of like the golden age of like cultural sort of
because it had defining things. We don't have anything that defines our generation on things.
Well, in that era, you couldn't just pull out your phone and look anything you wanted up. You had to go out and seek it. So you went to libraries to learn. If you were into art, you went to an art exhibit or street art, as we were talking about earlier. You went to different places. You could do everything on your phone now on a computer, where you're not actually out there in the culture interacting with people.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's actually a very, very important point, because I wanted to bring up like and it's not necessarily to bash like obviously like the advanced technology, but like. The one thing I always tell people is that, like, the thing that seems to be absent, at least from our culture nowadays, is I feel as if that sort of call to adventure spirit kind of is dwindling a bit. And, like, I feel as if that really does influence the way that the arts sort of, like, manifests, like, art and culture sort of manifests. Like, I feel as if people are less compelled
to go out.
Yeah, maybe I am honestly wrong about it, but I feel as if people...
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, I feel as if people are less compelled to seek that sort of adventure.
I think because of the computers and everything, it's just like proof that people have seen a lot of the Earth, so why would you even bother? Yeah. Is what some people think. I think it's still worth going to look.
Yeah, another thing is like we look back at these times and think like... Excuse me. Like people were doing drugs. People were being very debaucherous, which, I mean, would you argue that they were being debaucherous?
Oh, not everybody, but it wasn't really. I wouldn't say debauchery. Like I said, it was just as casual as smoking a cigarette or drinking a cup of coffee. That's really what it was.
Yeah, but I guess people nowadays see it as that because maybe I don't know. Maybe they.
Well, a lot of people are too uptight these days, which is really bad.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think they're uptight? Well, it's a different generation. I mean, for example, if you grew up or you were a child or weren't born yet when 9/11 happened, that was a big blow to the United States. And then growing up in that era, all you've known is the government has got your phone tapped. They're looking at this, they're looking at that, they're looking at, and it's just
Anxiety.
yeah, a lot of anxiety for younger people. And I've seen when I've gone out on dates as an older person, I'm going to be 58 in May, that I'm out with a girl on a date, and you see two people that are even married people. They're not even talking to each other at a table. They're texting each other at the table. To me, this
Does that actually happen?
Yes, it's happened. I've seen. I mean, it's insane to me. I mean, I don't understand. People are not having conversations like they used to anymore.
That's the big thing, isn't it?
I have people also that who have kids and grandkids, and they tell me that if they have them over for the holidays, the grandmother or their mother or whoever is having the meal, when they get to the door, they take their phones away from them because they said, this is Thanksgiving, this is Christmas Eve. You will not be gabbing on your phone or playing with your tablet or your laptop to force the conversation, which is kind of sad because, I mean, it's good that they're this way, but it shouldn't have to be forced. It's a shame that...
Yeah, the human...
The electron... Yeah. It's very important. I mean, from when the internet started till now, it's great in so many ways, but there's a dark side to it as well.
I guess you can say that that's kind of that's kind of the revelation that we need to have coming out of it. Like, it's just like, I mean... Because I know LSD was, and like stuff like acid, like while accessible, the actual effects of them weren't that well documented, which is why I mean, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say these even conspiracies anymore. Honestly, they unleashed them in certain communities to see what the effects are, like, but I guess that's...
You mean like crack in the 80s?
Yeah. But I guess like I mean, because every generation has a takeaway, and I guess the takeaway that I've heard at least was that like the drugs, that it was, like you said, like, so for a lot of these other things, like, it could be it's just normal as having a cup of coffee, but there are some of them that were just actively destroying people's lives.
Right. Unfortunately, I lost a number of friends, a couple that committed suicide, a couple that they did so many acid trips. They're still, as far as I know, a few of them are still alive today, but they're not alive, if you know what I mean.
Like they're vegetarian.
Right, they're...
Like we were talking about, like the guy who was in Pirates of the Caribbean, like
Keith Richards.
Yeah, Keith Richards.
Which I was making him laugh one day at work because somebody where I used to work had bought me his autobiography. I don't know who would have had to write down the words that Keith Richards was saying about his life, because can anybody understand the man? I don't know. So, but it was a great read. And he used to, and the Stones, I don't know about it anymore, but back in the day, they used to get pure medicinal cocaine. They did not cop on the streets or behind a stage or any from a fan. They actually got medicinal cocaine, which, how the hell the guy's still alive, I have no idea, because that's pure. That's not cut, that's not crack, that's
cocaine.
Yeah, that's lights out Charlie. I don't, God bless the guy that he still walks the earth, but but back then, almost all those rock guys, I think, like Eric Clapton, for example, I think he was a better guitarist when he was messed up on heroin. As soon as he turned straight, he really started playing music that, other than the music about his son, when his son had fallen to his death, that was terrible, that, very mellow song he wrote about him, but his other music after that was kind of I said, who's this? And I don't even know who this guy is anymore, because most of those guys were high and they wrote beautiful music.
What is the difference? Like, what was the difference between his music when he was high and music?
It just had more feeling to it, more heart, more kick-ass.
It's pretty hard for some people to, like, really be that way when they're sober.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people like getting drunk or getting high, because they're able to
when you talk about art, I think that comes out in people.
That's interesting. Like, when it's like a sort of... It's sort of... I know, like, when people say, like, DMT, not DMT. It's like a taunt. It's like a drug that.
Pull that up, Jamie.
No, shut up. There's like a drug that they say, like, I was listening to someone, like, basically, like, when they take it, it opens up like a sort of chemical pathway in their mind. And
I think you are talking about DMT.
Is it DMT?
DMT is the one where you see aliens and.
Oh yeah, it is DMT then. Oh. Like they say, like for me,
it's like acid on steroids.
Yeah, for me, it seems like the drugs were mainly to sort of open up gateways into.
Well, because it's something
the
you
soul.
can't see on your phone. That's something that's like, all right, back in the day, you used to like go to the Grand Canyon because you couldn't see it on the internet. Now you have to take DMT to see aliens because like you can't see that on your phone.
So it's the next level, essentially.
Yeah, the next level of drugs.
Yeah, like I guess things are just gonna get more potent, you know.
Well, when I was younger as well, very few kids were taking prescription drugs. Today, they give kids at a young age, they give them prescription drugs if they're depressed, if this, if that, if this. And they're already doing drugs, not doing them to get high, but they're already exposed to drugs at a very young age. And that's led to a lot of suicides, a lot of horrible things have happened in the back of that. You know, back then, you know, when I went to the doctor, they'd give you a needle, or they would, you know, they'd come up with some old remedy like, you know, eat this or do that, or just stay in bed and drink water and you'll be all right. They didn't give you pills the way they do today. It's really...
Well, I often talk about, I reference a guy named Jonathan Haidt who wrote a book detailing like the sort of how maybe this came to be, called The Coddling of the American Mind. And he was explaining how like a reason why you get a lot of these high, really high, like ridiculous levels of, say, like not necessarily autism, but anxiety, especially in young girls, is that like it's a product of this sort of internet culture where you get that immediate satisfaction of being able to communicate with somebody like on the spot, or being able to experience something at least in a facet.
They're also like conditioned to feel bad about their bodies and things like that because they see like obviously subjectively but more attractive women like on like things like Instagram or something. They're like, why don't I look like that? I mean, guys could do that too. Like they could see like freaking superhero movies.
Yeah,
I know that, as I was saying earlier, a lot of kids today, they don't get really any exercise. A lot of the school programs have been cut back, and back when I was young, and I mean, I know it's a long time ago, but we all were somehow involved in sports. Even kids in the neighborhood, the girls and guys would all play a basketball game together, softball, run bases, stoop ball, stickball, all this stuff. And we all, somebody, you were on, I was on basketball, I was on Little League team, I played softball, I played foot. We all were in shape. We ate all the junk. We didn't have health snacks back then. It was all junk. It was sugar, sugar, sugar. Everybody drank soda, but none of us, there might have been one or two kids that were heavy. Other than that,
yeah. But was it sugar or was it corn syrup? That's another big problem because we have way more chemicals in our food now than probably back then.
The point I'm not 100% sure, but the point I'm making is that we ate just as much junk
for the time.
And for the time, and because we were exercising,
and you knew it was unhealthy,
right? But we burned it off, I guess, because we were out, especially in the summer when school was out. As soon as the sun came up, we were outside, and we didn't come home until the sun went in.
Yeah,
other than your parents calling you home, you had to eat dinner or lunch or something. That was it.
You lived I guess to quote, you always quote Thomas. No. Was Teddy Roosevelt? Yeah. You lived
Thomas Roosevelt.
Thomas Roosevelt. You lived a somewhat because he says that you lived a somewhat strenuous life, and it made you it made you better off as a result of it. Obviously,
I know there was a kid the other day at IKEA that was crying. The kid was screaming. Maybe the kid was 3-4 years old. I don't know.
Here we go.
Crying and crying, and I went over to the parent with one of the stuffed animals. And he just got really rude and like, get away from here, get away from here. I thought it would, a lot of times when there's a kid crying or something along that line, I'll just give him a toy and they stop crying, but he didn't want no part of it. This kid, and then he's bringing him throughout the store screaming his brains out. It was distracting. It was really, and here's somebody coddling that kid. Why didn't he take the kid outside the store? Or something. I don't know. And you try to be helpful today, and everybody's like, whoa, like, get out of here, mind your business. Well, years ago, it would your mother or father wouldn't have reacted that way if that was you crying and somebody was trying to, you know.
They would have trying to beat you within inches of your life.
Well, or no, I don't know. But if a neighbor interjected, or even a stranger at a store, it wouldn't have been the reaction that I got from that guy. It's a different world today.
Well, I think it's because the parents might feel more vain. You know, like if it teaches me how to raise my kid.
Well, today they call the parents. I don't know if you heard this term. They call them helicopters passe. It's called concierge parents. You know, when you go on to a hotel,
concierge service.
You have a concierge service where they'll do anything. They'll get you the paper they want. They'll give you the breakfast you want, whatever, up in a room service, middle of the night, the booze you want or whatever. Or maybe an extra pillow. That's what they do to
because
these
I
kids
guess
today.
I guess the takeaway that we got from that era was that we're not doing enough to help our kids because, I mean, I forget exactly what it was that I sort of, I guess, opened our eyes to that idea, but I guess it was mainly the sort of rise of like extremely costly, like especially like things like 9/11, like extremely costly things like shootings became more prevalent, and I have reasons that I believe why a lot of these things become spanning out the way they are. I think it has a lot to do with society, how we are sort of failing in our cultivation of the males in our society. I think that's like a really big part of the reason, along with Jonathan Haidt's what he says about how we've been sort of coddled especially by like the advent of the internet. But I feel as if the takeaway from that era was that we're not really doing enough for our kids. You know, we need to educate them on things like drugs. You know, we need to tell them to say no and how to cultivate, you know, the sort of inner strength to resist the temptations of all these vices. But because that's what we were fed when we were kids. That's what we were told. Like, you know, you had the cartoon line that told you to just say no.
It's interesting to note that when I was young, one of the big toys that was always advertised on TV was the original G.I. Joes. Yeah. We all played with them. Marx was a big toy company, Ideal, which was right here, not too far from where I used to live in Queens Village. Big toy company. They were around for years. They made a lot of machine guns, and we all played with these guns. And we played. There was a lot of cowboy shows, westerns, movies, and TV, and we played all those shows, but you didn't hear about all these shootings or anybody in my neighborhood ever later on getting a gun and trying to hurt themselves.
That's another thing. Like it became so much more publicized as well. Like you hear, like people really do believe that you're in such an insurmountable amount of danger when you just do something as walk outside in the middle of the night. We're actually like the level of safety that we have now. It pales in comparison to, say, back in the day. Like people who do these crimes, they get prosecuted, and people like don't really do a lot of them very often. They often purport that we had like a ridiculous amount of school shootings, but like they also count a school shooting as, say, like an officer is inside a school, like protecting or whatever. And like if his gun accidentally misfires, then they count that as a school shooting. Like, and so they push that as a. I'm not trying to get necessarily political about it, but like there's a lot of more visibility to these things, but there's not any nuance to them, you know?
Well, I don't like some of the analogy where they blame it's the music, it's the video. I mean, we had all of that. We had violent movies, and like I said, we were playing with guns, and you didn't have the same thing. So it has to be other things. It can't be the culture. It can't be. Yeah. Other countries have that culture. Canada has that culture. Canada, I think, might have more guns than the United States because they have a hunting culture. Most of Canada is wide open spaces. I've been there a number of times. It's a beautiful country. And they don't have killings, and they actually leave their doors open. They're not afraid to leave their doors open.
I had just watched why was I watching this? But it was a TSA.
I'm scared.
It was TSA agents in Canada. It's actually, their gun laws are, getting the guns into the country is actually really strict.
Is that right?
Like getting a handgun in there, or like even just having like a bullet in your car, like inside the car, not in the car, you know, like inside of the car, like not shot into
a cartridge.
Yeah, like things like that. They could get you, like, just turn you away or get you arrested. Like, it's different. It's probably just different. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. It's probably just a different culture, environment with different environment. Because you could go hunting and like you'll have a. You know, like, that's fine.
Listen, if I was honestly like someone who wanted to cause like mass harm in Canada, I probably wouldn't, just on the merit that it's cold.
There was also they stopped this guy who had the guns legally. Like, it checked out. It was a legal gun to bring into Canada, but he had a sign on the back that said "Don't mess with me, I'm armed," or something along those lines. And they said, you better take that down because they're not gonna respond well to that sign. Mm-hmm. So it's different. Like, they're not as like uptight and like ready to fight as we are.
They'll give you more wiggle room, essentially.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you can't do that.
All right, so last question.
Yeah, sure.
We kind of talked about a lot of these. Like I said, like these.
Okay.
Yeah, these were just kind of
natural questions.
Yeah, but I'll end the questions with this one. Tell us the wildest story you can, if you can.
Well, I could tell a lot of wild stories, but I would think the wildest story was during my cocaine phase. In my early 30s, I was dared to go onto a pool table where I hung out in a bar, not far from where I live right now in Floral Park, with a G-string on. So I did it. I had a black G-string on. I guess I was about 33 years old at the time. I got up there. It had little tiny finger handcuffs on it. I got up onto the thing. I
Nothing
was
else
there.
but the G-string.
Right, the G-string.
And
that's
no,
it.
but nothing else. Okay.
What I did was I was there one night. I just go into the bathroom. They don't know. They figure he's just going to the bathroom. I came out. I jumped on top of the pool table. Had the G-string. I was gyrating up there. And people started throwing tips at me. So I must have made about $80, $90. And then my friend Colleen came over and tore the damn thing off. So
Wait, hold on.
What?
Yes.
Wait, while you're up there.
yeah, so she took that off. I ran back into the bathroom. But I would think that that's probably the wildest thing that I ever did. I have other wild stories, but that was something that actually happened to me. And yeah, I made about $90 on that deal, but I lost my G-string and got a
You
little
could get away
embarrassed,
with
but
that
not
back
too
then.
embarrassed.
Nowadays, they'd like try to call you something or whatever, like call you a predator or something. Like it's just not fair.
Oh yeah.
Like everyone else got to have so much more fun, and
But
when we want to have fun, we get screwed over.
It was a fun experience.
You got $90 out of it.
yeah.
$90 reduce back
Yeah.
back in that
Yeah,
time.
they were
money
throwing
too.
big tips, so
Jesus.
interesting.
I wonder if I would get tips if I did that.
Well, God,
Probably not.
Well, hold on. Let's just think about that for a second. That was money they could. It was a bar, right?
Yes.
That was money they could have used to drink. They gave it to. So what does that say about?
I don't know. I guess they liked what they saw. I don't
Yeah.
know. Or they
Well,
couldn't
you're
believe what they saw. Or they were like, what the hell is this? I don't know.
I'd pay money for this.
Any wacky occurrence is just something to show.
But, yeah.
All right, so
Imagine
now-
if people paid for this show.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Imagine. All right, so we're gonna do art studies.
Okay, very
Art from
good.
the era. Well,
My
an
glasses on.
very famed boomer goggles.
Yeah.
A very famous artist from the era. You say his name better than I do.
I think it's Basquiat.
Yeah, Jean-Michel Basquiat. Jean.
Jean.
Yeah.
Jean, yeah.
Yeah, Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Spelled like Jean. But
Yeah, born in 1960.
Michael.
Right? Or is it?
Jean-Michael Basquiat.
Well, it can't be Jean and then Michael then well, I
Why
guess
not?
it is.
That's
the
who,
same
that was his
Shawn Michaels.
name.
No, but it's like
His name can't be Austin Andrews.
no. But I'm just saying, like, it's so aggravating because it's like French.
It's like Spider-Man. There's a hyphen between Spider and Man.
No, that's not
Jean-Michael.
That's not the point. Like the word that you can. There's a French way to pronounce. Okay, I don't know why I'm so mad about this. Anyway, let's continue.
When his mom was just a loving Jew, just says, Jean Michael, yes.
Shut up. Anyway, died in 1988 of a heroin overdose. Did a lot of his art when he was high. And we're gonna see what came of that. Obviously, he worked with along Andy Warhol, stuff like that. He was very popular with him. Andy Warhol thought he was like an absolute freaking genius. He was initially part of like a graffiti sort of tag called SAMO, which stands for same old Scheisen.
Graffiti was big in the city at that time. I mean, pretty much you had some subway cars. You could see them, especially when they were on the L, on the elevated trains, where the whole car was graffiti on the outside.
Really?
The whole cars were covered in graffiti
You don't see them
on
now,
the
do you?
outside.
Well, there's
Not too
cars
much.
now.
Yeah.
There's new cars now, that's why.
Yeah.
So they're all covered in graffiti. Some of them would just looked
Plus, if
horrible,
you
but
did
some
that,
looked
Some of them
beautiful.
looked horrible.
Yeah, some looked horrible, but some really looked. It was art.
Because
It
you
was art.
only see the good ones. I can just imagine like pure garbage. On
Right,
the
it was
side of
beautiful. They'd even
side of a car.
tag, as the expression was, they tag things. So they would tag inside there. The art inside the car too. Everywhere, all over the city, you saw.
It was beautiful. It was really good looking.
I would say most of it was nice, but it's really all damaging. Either
also
city
cameras
property or
everywhere
other
today.
people's
Yeah.
property. That's another thing. Yeah, too many cameras too.
Well,
Yeah.
it's free. If you what's the classic phrase? You wouldn't be afraid if you didn't have something to hide. That's the thing.
Yeah, but still.
So something ominous about it. All right. With the first piece, he also dated. I told you about this. He also dated Madonna.
We got 5 minutes to do this art review.
We're doing it.
Then you got Mixed Mysteries.
So
Maybe.
I couldn't find a title for this, and that's when I realized that a lot of his art pieces
We
are
are so
untitled.
good at this show.
Shut up. Oh, well, hold on. A lot of his art pieces are honestly untitled. Like it says untitled. He doesn't have a title for it. But one thing that is congruous in a lot of them is he puts a crown. You see that crown on the top of it?
Yes.
He puts a crown over a lot of the subjects' like heads. And if you notice also, he's obviously wearing a suit, and he's got
A monocle?
I don't know, but he does have a name tag. It says, "Hello, my name is." and then I think that's actually his tag.
My name is Untitled.
Shut up. But I mean, this is some like stuff like this. Like he did this during his heyday, like stuff like this. He had sold for exorbitant amount of money, and it's a part of like a sort of neo-expressionist movement.
Mhm.
And it, I mean, people said that he'd sort of well, I don't know if necessarily he said this, but like I read somewhere that people said that he defined the era, like during the late '80s to early sort of.
That's true, but still, in a lot of ways, he didn't get recognized until well after his death. I know that there's a documentary that they've been running on, I forget if it's HBO or Showtime, and about his life, and you should watch it. It might have originally been on PBS, I'm not sure, but it's a very interesting documentary.
Yeah, but what do you, Ralph, since you're the big star here, what do you feel when you look at this? What do you think?
Well,
he's
I
trying
could
to
tell you
convey?
one thing. When I was high, I wouldn't have wanted to see this picture because it's kind of scary looking at
Yeah.
it. It looks like something that could have been, I don't know what he might have been having a bad go of it when he was painting this. Because
what
bad experience with drugs if he was painting while he was high.
Yeah, what I was thinking about this is that like it seems to be parodying the sort of office sort of prim and proper structure,
Right.
like because he did a lot of awareness towards like sort of towards societal sort of racism and stuff like that, and like how it affected the black community. So what I kind of thinking when I see this, if it is in that context, he might be trying to imply that like it's somewhat stifling to the African American being within this sort of like structure that demands this sort of completely different way of expressing yourself from like the way I guess that his like I guess the black culture ended up actually being, or how it was before in the before days, or rather before they were colonized, because he was very anti-colonial.
Right.
So I guess it might be sort of because to me like it's obviously like a big smile, like looks very fashionable. I guess he was trying to, but I get a sense of like agony from it, like What do you think, Mike?
It's like the agony's coming from the inside, but he's still like grinning.
Yeah.
I feel like he's suffering on the inside, and the drugs, if he was high while he made this, was bringing those feelings of agony out.
Jeez, we're running out of time. Next one. Oh, this was sold recently, 2017, I think, for $110 million. I think it was the most money that was ever spent on a single piece of art, and it's apparently one of his most famous pieces.
Do you know when he actually did this? What year or anything?
1980,
like that?
I think.
Oh, okay.
Or no, 1980 something.
There's another melancholy photo.
No,
Not
yeah,
photo,
he does look
picture.
like he's sad. And I think it also does. I think that the subject is an African American.
Was this closer to his death? You say he died when?
1988.
Is that supposed to be the map of Africa in the background?
What?
Is that a map in the background? Oh no.
I don't think so.
It might be. Who knows?
It honestly could be. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, so I thought it was.
Head's definitely cluttered.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That can simulate like sort of like a confusion or distress.
Yeah.
This was how sort of African, like the bust of an African head was kind of like not symbolized necessarily by people who were observing it, but by other Africans that I believe. But I guess the takeaway from this is that it just simulates. I feel as if it just simulates its extreme melancholy, like with the blues.
It's probably got going.
Yeah.
54
Next one.
seconds. Oh, this one's just a mess. I mean, it looks good.
If you notice it says Greenwood there, I was hoping. Do you know if that's relevant at all, like Greenwood, with the word?
Greenwood Cemetery
Maybe.
in Brooklyn, I think. That looks kind of like more like graffiti-like to me. That I've seen on walls, on the highway bypasses, along Long Island Railroad, on trains themselves back in the day, subways, even on some buses,
The bird could be a pigeon.
even in bathrooms.
Wait a second.
Public bathrooms.
I actually didn't notice this. Did you see one of its claws is clutching a bundle of arrows? This might actually be the United States seal. Like he's trying to parody
Oh, hey.
the seal of the United.
Yeah, now I see that. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
And the other one's like, because in one hand, whoops, I'm sorry. In one hand, in one claw, it's clutching arrows, and another one, I think it's clutching or something. I think it's free or something like that. Maybe, yeah.
Let's take 5 more minutes.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Extended feature, everybody.
Yeah. Then just go to the next one then. But that's really interesting. You said that was more like the graffiti that you
Yeah, that definitely.
sure.
Yeah. Oh, this looks. Could it be African images?
Yeah, I'm
It
thinking
looks-
African Americans. Yeah.
And also,
Thinking African
it
American.
Shut up.
kind of looks like old.
It doesn't sound bad if you don't
No,
say
no, I'm
it.
not saying it looks bad. It's just like a very blatant, like observation. If you notice the middle guy, he's got like 1, 2, 3, 4. He has like 8 arms.
I think those are his ribs.
ribs, I think. Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
It kind of looks like old cave drawings, too.
If you look in the background, it actually kind of looks like there's a gray cloud in the top right corner that's like striking lightning maybe down, because those
It's-
are buildings for sure.
Right.
It might be symbolizing the agony of like the African people.
Why does it sound so?
No, I'm just it
No.
looks like-
I'm not trying to say that you sound bad for it, but it's like, I guess making that comment about it seems so detached from his message. I guess
But what is his message?
Well, no, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's really interesting trying to critique art and
Because there's also a city in the background, so
Yeah.
maybe
Oh, is that a
it's-
one-way sign that's crunched up there in the right-hand corner? What is that? You see
Ooh,
that?
wow, I don't even know.
maybe it's symbolizing that everybody's
Looks like a
suffering,
one-way
not
sign.
even because of the cities being destroyed.
Maybe.
It might be like history's going to repeat itself one day.
It seems like it does seem like there's like a fire or something kind of like a commotion
Consuming.
going on. Yeah.
I can't really tell.
Well, why? Oh, let's ask the question. Why would somebody paint in such an abstract way, like, or commit to such an abstract way of expressing?
Well, for one thing, if he was on drugs, but the other thing is, I
There's
think
inner Picasso, that looks like.
I wouldn't call it poorly drawn, but like
It's very harsh.
It's very harsh, and I think that's the point. I'm getting like agony across to you, because it's not an elegant painting. It's a harsh, hard to look at painting.
And maybe that's trying to simulate how harsh reality is, like how everybody's sort of ugly, well,
Yeah.
quote unquote. And like if you notice, like everybody's smiling, like, or almost pretty much smiling in a lot of these pictures. Like, but
In some fashion, I suppose.
yeah, or it's simulating that they're trying to outwardly express a certain emotion, but I guess what he's trying to do is he's trying to juxtapose that. Thank you, by like just making them out to be these ugly abstract images.
All right.
Yeah, very powerful. Next one. This is an angel, apparently.
Well, you can see that it has
A halo, yeah. And
a halo around it.
Reminds me of Ringo Starr's MS Paint drawings.
No, this is incredibly way better.
What are you saying?
Did they
those are-
draw a penis?
Yeah, that is actually a penis. That's hold on, no, but that's what I was trying to say. I think he's trying to parody the Western conception of like the human body, because you know how they have the small penises and the small genitals and the
It might be a comment that. You know how we tend to depict angels as beautiful humans with the wings. He might be trying to make it so that, like, maybe try to make a statement that humans are nowhere close to being angels, so he made this to show it off.
yeah. I think it isn't. No. There's another. I think that's just another crown. But anyway. Again, like it seems that all of it is. You can go to the next one, Steve.
This last one.
Yeah. Oh, that's the last one.
This last one.
Oh, excuse me. I thought I had more. Yeah, whatever. It seems that it's just trying to outwardly express like a type of ugliness about humanity and about maybe even art. You know, because
Maybe.
I mean, I know your experience based on like what you were explaining to us about the times. It doesn't seem necessarily too. I mean, just from you telling us, it doesn't seem too bad, but there definitely was a kind of, in the backdrop of a lot of that, maybe I guess leisure is, for people like him, he was trying to tackle on structures of racism. He was trying to tackle on, like extreme societal problems and everything. But unfortunately, I'd love to hear you retort to that, but we actually have to end. We actually have to end this
Well,
time.
thank you for having me. I enjoyed meeting you gentlemen, and it was a great show. Very enjoyable.
Yeah. Why don't you end us off? We say when you end, you say just whatever you want, but you just have to finish it off with saying we're going down.
What do you want me to say?
Never mind. This has been Tales from the Bottom of the Ocean. Don't worry.
I won't.
This has been Tales from the Bottom of the Ocean. Thank you all for watching.
Even though I'm on Facebook.
We're going down.